Have you ever crawled into bed at night, hoping for a peaceful, uninterrupted sleep, only to find yourself wide awake at 2 a.m., staring at the ceiling and wondering, what is wrong with me? You're not alone. It happens to so many people, especially after 60. And the most frustrating part? Sometimes the very things we think are helping us sleep, the warm herbal tea, the evening walk, that little snack before bed, can actually be the culprits behind our restless nights. Let me tell you about Margaret. She's 69, lives in a quiet neighborhood outside Phoenix, and has always considered herself healthy. Walks every morning, eats her greens, even does a bit of yoga with her local group once a week. But for the past few months, she's been exhausted. Not just the I had a busy day kind of tired, bone deep, dragging through molasses, falling asleep on the sofa at noon kind of fatigue. And at first, she thought it was just age, or maybe stress, or maybe she just needed a new pillow. But no, it wasn't her pillow, or her mattress, or even her age. It was something else entirely, something she'd been doing every single night, because she thought it was good for her. She wasn't alone in this mistake either. In fact, millions of people over 60 are doing the same things every evening, completely unaware they're quietly sabotaging their sleep. And when your sleep suffers, everything suffers. Your energy, your memory, even your mood. So today, I want to talk to you about 7 common bedtime habits that seem healthy, but aren't. These aren't scary or dramatic changes. They're subtle, gentle. And the best part is, once you know what they are, you can make small tweaks, easy adjustments that could transform the way you sleep and feel in the morning. Let's begin with one of the most surprising. Margaret's bedtime ritual used to include a steaming cup of chamomile tea. Sounds harmless, right? Even calming. That's what she thought. Every night, about 30 minutes before bed, she'd warm up a mug, settle into her recliner, and sip while reading a few pages of her novel. But what she didn't realize was that she was also adding a generous spoonful of honey into that tea. Just a touch of sweetness. Nothing artificial, just a natural sweetener. Sometimes she'd also grab a cracker or two with it. Something light. Not a full meal, just a little nibble. Here's the problem. Even though chamomile can help some people relax, that honey and those crackers were enough to spike her blood sugar just before sleep. And for many older adults, those little spikes cause what's known as reactive hypoglycemia during the night. That's when your blood sugar drops suddenly after a rise, which signals your body to wake up. Heart racing, mind alert, sleep interrupted. So what Margaret thought was calming her was actually the very thing pulling her out of deep sleep every night around 2:30 a.m. Now, I'm not saying you should throw out your tea bags, but if you've been adding sweeteners or little snacks before bed, it's worth taking a second look. Our bodies process sugar and carbs differently after 60. What worked for you 10 years ago might be keeping you up now, without you even realizing it. Let's talk about another habit that often feels like a reward, especially after a long day: evening screen time. Margaret's husband, Tom, loves watching documentaries. Every evening they cozy up together and turn on their favorite streaming service. Sometimes a nature special, sometimes a true crime mystery. And if they got really into it, they'd watch until 11 or even midnight. Here's where it gets tricky. The blue light from screens, TVs, tablets, even phones, can suppress the body's natural melatonin production. That's the hormone that signals your brain it's time to sleep. As we age, melatonin production naturally declines, so any extra disruption makes it even harder to fall asleep and stay asleep. But it's not just the light, it's also the content. Have you ever watched something dramatic or emotional before bed, even if it's just the evening news, and then felt strangely wired afterward? That's your nervous system kicking into high gear. For older adults whose sleep cycles are already more sensitive, this can throw off the entire rhythm of the night. Margaret didn't think much of it. She'd doze off on the couch, sure. But then she'd wake up around 1 or 2 a.m., wide-eyed and restless. Her brain had never really shut down. It had just paused, like a movie on hold. After cutting back on late-night screen time and choosing softer, quieter activities like journaling or listening to calming music, her sleep slowly began to improve. She didn't give up TV entirely. She just moved it earlier in the evening and let her nights end more gently. Now maybe you're thinking, but I like watching something before bed, it helps me relax. And that's perfectly okay. You don't have to give it up completely. But consider shifting your viewing an hour earlier, or dimming the screen, or wearing blue light blocking glasses, small things truly. But powerful ones. There's one more bedtime mistake Margaret had no idea she was making. And this one might surprise you too. She loved her warm evening showers, not too hot, not too cold, just enough to soothe her muscles and wash the day away. Sometimes she'd even throw in a bit of lavender body wash, just to help her wind down. But here's the twist. She was showering right before bed. And even though that warmth felt comforting, it was actually raising her core body temperature at exactly the wrong time. See, in order to fall into a deep, restful sleep, your body needs to cool down slightly. It's a signal to the brain that it's time to rest. When you step out of a hot shower and slip under the covers too quickly, your body hasn't had a chance to lower its internal temperature, and that can delay the onset of sleep or cause light, fragmented rest. The fix? It's simple. Just move the shower a bit earlier. An hour to an hour and a half before bed gives your body time to relax and cool down naturally. That way, you still get all the calming benefits of a warm shower without disrupting your sleep. Margaret made the change gradually. She shifted her shower to right after dinner instead of just before bed. At first, it felt a little odd, like it messed with her routine. But after just a few nights, she noticed something. Her eyelids started getting heavy right on time. Her body felt more ready, her mind quieter. Sometimes it's not about doing less or giving things up. It's about doing the same things, just a little differently. That's the magic of this stage of life. You've already done so much. You've tried so many routines. And now, with just a few thoughtful shifts, you can fine-tune your evenings so they truly serve you, body, mind, and spirit. So if your nights have felt restless lately, or if your mornings leave you more tired than when you went to bed, just know it's not your fault. It's not just getting old, and you're not alone. There's real power in paying attention to the small things, because those small things, the evening tea, the glowing screen, the timing of a shower, they add up. And when you start gently adjusting them, the results can be surprisingly big. Let's keep going. One evening, about a week after making those small changes, Margaret sat by the window in her favourite chair. She wasn't watching TV, she wasn't checking emails, just sipping plain warm water, no honey this time, and gazing out at the moonlit garden. And for the first time in months, she felt something unexpected. Peace. Not just in her body, but in her mind. But there was still one thing troubling her. She was waking up sore, not just a stiff back or neck that she could stretch out. This was different, a kind of deep ache in her hips, her lower back, sometimes even her shoulders, and always worse after a full night in bed. Now you'd think lying down for 7 or 8 hours would be restful. But if your body isn't positioned right during that time, those hours can do more harm than good. This brings us to another bedtime mistake many people over 60 don't even think about: the wrong kind of pillow or mattress support. Margaret's mattress was only 5 years old. It wasn't sagging, it wasn't rock hard either, but it was just soft enough to let her hips sink a bit too deep. That, combined with a flat pillow, left her spine misaligned night after night. And the result? Her muscles were working overtime while she slept. She never considered this a real issue. After all, it wasn't new, but after talking with a friend who had just bought a firmer orthopedic-style mattress topper, Margaret gave it a try. She didn't replace her whole bed, just added a medium-firm topper and a contoured pillow that supported the natural curve of her neck. And within a few days, the morning aches started to fade. She didn't feel old getting out of bed anymore, just rested, loose, comfortable. Sometimes the problem isn't our age, it's our alignment. If you've been waking up sore or needing an hour to loosen up in the morning, take a moment to consider how your body's being held during the night. Are your shoulders hunched? Is your lower back supported? Are your knees knocking together? These small posture details make a huge difference, especially after 60, when our joints are less forgiving and our muscles take longer to recover. A simple body pillow between the knees, a rolled towel under the small of your back, and extra support under your neck. None of these things require fancy equipment, just a little intention. And speaking of intention, let's talk about something even more powerful than posture, preparation. Because the way we prepare for sleep, mentally, emotionally, matters just as much as what we eat or how we lie down. And here's where Margaret found her biggest surprise. She had a habit, like many of us, of lying in bed and mentally reviewing the day, the bills she needed to pay, the neighbour's dog that barked all afternoon, the strange ache in her right knee that came and went, the fact that she couldn't remember where she put the spare keys. In her mind, this felt like harmless processing. But in reality, it was fueling a low-level anxiety loop, one that kept her mind active even as her eyes grew tired. And science backs this up. Racing thoughts and emotional tension are one of the top causes of midlife and late-life insomnia. Not trauma, not fear, just the ordinary, repetitive chatter of the mind. So, how do you calm it down? Margaret started with something so simple it almost felt silly, a pen and a notebook. Each evening, about 30 minutes before bed, she'd sit down and write everything on her mind. Not a fancy journal, not poetry, just a messy little brain dump, grocery items, frustrations, worries, things she needed to remember. It didn't matter, she just wrote it all down, and then she closed the notebook, left it on the kitchen table, and went to bed. She didn't try to solve anything, she didn't analyze her thoughts, she just released them, and that tiny act of release created space in her mind. It told her brain, we've handled this for now, you can rest. Some nights she also added a line of gratitude, just one. Something good from the day. A smile from her granddaughter, the smell of rosemary in the garden, a favorite song she hadn't heard in years. It wasn't magic, it wasn't instant. But over time, this gentle habit helped her nervous system wind down naturally, without pills or supplements. We often underestimate how much our thoughts affect our bodies. But tension, even when it's invisible, has weight. It lingers, and when it goes unresolved into the night, it keeps the body just alert enough to prevent real, restorative rest. So if you've ever found yourself lying awake, your brain rehearsing conversations or worrying about errands, try writing it down. Let it go. Don't judge what you write. Don't try to be clever. Just empty the drawer, because when your mind feels clear, your body can finally soften. And when your body softens, sleep can return. Now, there was one last habit Margaret didn't even realize was affecting her until her doctor pointed it out. And it's a big one, especially for older adults. Hydration. Yes, drinking enough water is vital, we all know that. But here's the tricky part. When you drink, it matters just as much as how much. Margaret, like many people her age, had started drinking more water during the day to help her digestion and energy. But she'd also gotten into the habit of sipping a full glass just before bed, to stay hydrated through the night. The problem? She was now waking up at least twice a night, not because of nightmares or noise, but because her bladder was full, and every time she got up, the lights, the movement, the cold floor, it all pulled her further from that precious deep sleep. And even though she usually fell back asleep quickly, the interruptions added up. Over time, they left her groggy, disoriented, more likely to nap during the day, which then made falling asleep at night even harder. It became a cycle. So her doctor suggested a simple change: front-load hydration earlier in the day. A full glass of water right when she woke up. Another with breakfast, sips throughout the morning and early afternoon. But after 6 p.m., just small sips, and none within an hour of bed. And wouldn't you know it, she started sleeping longer stretches. Her body still got the hydration it needed, just when it needed it. Sometimes good habits, like staying hydrated, can turn into sleep disruptors if we're not careful about timing. It's a dance, really, between the things we need and the rhythms our bodies are asking for. When we listen closely, when we stop doing things just out of habit and start doing them with awareness, the results can be quietly transformational. Sleep isn't just a passive thing that happens to us. It's something we create. We build it gently, moment by moment, choice by choice. And for Margaret, each of these little shifts, from her tea to her screen habits, to her bedtime journaling, and even her water intake, became part of a more peaceful, nourishing nighttime rhythm. And slowly her body responded. Her mind relaxed, and sleep, the kind of deep, healing sleep she hadn't felt in years, finally came back. But as her sleep began to improve, Margaret noticed something else. Mornings felt lighter, not in a physical way at first, but emotionally. She wasn't dragging herself to the coffee maker. She wasn't walking around in a fog until noon. Instead, she started to feel like herself again, that clear-minded, steady version of her that she hadn't felt in a long time. And yet, just as things were getting better, something else crept in, something quieter, something she hadn't expected. Loneliness. It surprised her, because on paper Margaret wasn't alone. She had friends, a husband, weekly social activities, but late at night, in that quiet space just before bed, a kind of emptiness would settle in. And the more silent her world became, the darker the room, the softer the house, the louder that emptiness felt. At first, she tried to ignore it, turn on a podcast, scroll through old photos, pick up a book even when she wasn't really reading it. But it stayed with her, a heavy little ache in her chest, and one night she whispered aloud, "Why do I feel so alone when I'm finally resting?" That question lingered. It led her to something we don't talk about often enough, the emotional weight of bedtime, especially after 60. For many older adults, the hours before sleep can be the loneliest part of the day. The distractions fade, the noise dims, and suddenly the feelings we pushed aside, the memories, the regrets, the what-ifs, they all rise up. And when our emotional world feels unsettled, sleep becomes fragile. This isn't a bedtime mistake in the traditional sense. It's not about what you eat or how you lie down, but it's just as real, because emotional restlessness can be just as disruptive as physical discomfort. So Margaret did something brave. She didn't push it away this time. Instead, she leaned in. She started a little ritual, not just for her body, but for her heart. Every evening after her journaling and her warm shower, she would take 10 quiet minutes. She called it her gentle reflection. No phone, no TV, no distractions. Just her, a soft light, and sometimes a candle. And she would ask herself 2 questions. What do I need to release? And what do I want to carry into tomorrow? Some nights, the answers were heavy. She'd write down an old memory that resurfaced, something unresolved with her sister, or the ache she felt when she passed by her late mother's photo. Other nights, it was simple. She'd smile at the thought of her neighbor's laughter, or the way sunlight filtered through the blinds at noon. She learned to name the good things too, to notice them, to hold them gently. And something extraordinary began to happen. That emptiness she felt, it softened, not because she filled it with noise, but because she faced it with kindness, and sleep responded. You see, our hearts, like our bodies, need closure at the end of the day. A sense that things are okay, that we're safe, that we've honored what matters. If your mind often drifts to sadness or regret at bedtime, even if you don't talk about it, you're not broken, you're human. And that quiet ache? It deserves a little compassion, not distraction. Try asking yourself what you need to release, or what brought you comfort today. These aren't big questions, but they anchor you, they bring you home to yourself. Now there was one final habit Margaret had to unlearn, one she never thought would interfere with sleep, and that was pushing herself too hard during the day. Now stay with me here, because this might sound a little backwards. Margaret had always believed that the more tired you are, the better you sleep. So on days when her sleep had been poor, she would double down on her activity. She'd take extra long walks, clean the garage, catch up on chores, anything to wear herself out. But what she didn't realize was that she wasn't just tiring her body, she was overstimulating her nervous system, and that constant go, go, go feeling was making it even harder to settle at night. As we get older, our recovery rhythms shift. It's not about exhaustion anymore. It's about regulation, a gentle balance between effort and ease. So when Margaret started pacing her days differently, allowing moments of calm between tasks, taking her walks earlier in the day, saying no to that extra errand when she was already fatigued, something shifted. Her body stopped feeling like it was in constant catch-up mode. Her evenings stopped feeling like a crash landing, and her sleep, once again, began to deepen. Here's the truth no one tells us. Better sleep doesn't always start at bedtime. It starts in the morning. It starts with how you pace yourself, with how you move and rest and listen to your own rhythms. It starts with kindness. So if you've been trying to force sleep, or thinking that staying busy will somehow fix it, I want you to consider this. Maybe your body isn't asking for more activity. Maybe it's asking for more space, more softness, more quiet, more gentle transitions between doing and being. Margaret didn't overhaul her life. She didn't buy expensive gadgets or start some complicated wellness plan. She just slowed down. She gave herself permission to rest before bedtime, not just during it. And in doing so, she discovered a truth that so many of us forget in a world that worships productivity. Peace is productive too, because when we give our bodies space to reset, emotionally, physically, spiritually, they respond with balance, with healing, with rest. And that's what sleep really is, not a task, not a problem to solve, but a response, a mirror reflecting how gently or harshly we treat ourselves when we're awake. So tonight, when you lie down, I invite you to ask yourself, did I move my body but not push it too far? Did I give my mind a chance to exhale? Did I speak to myself with tenderness? Because the answers to those questions may matter more than any supplement or sleep aid. You deserve rest, not just as a reward for effort, but as a birthright. And just like Margaret discovered, it's never too late to reclaim it. As the weeks went by, Margaret began to trust her nights again. She no longer stared at the ceiling in dread, wondering how many hours she'd be tossing and turning. There was something else in her now, a steadiness, a softness, a quiet belief that her body knew what it needed, and that she didn't have to fight it anymore. But there was still one thing she hadn't fully explored, something she had ignored for years simply because no one had ever mentioned it. The role of light, not just screen light, we've already talked about that, but the natural rhythmic cycle of sunlight and darkness. You see, for most of her adult life, Margaret had been a lights-on kind of person. Her home was always well lit. She'd turn on the kitchen lights first thing in the morning, close the curtains if the sun was too bright, and even kept a little nightlight in the hallway just in case. But light, especially blue, and cool light is a powerful signal to the brain. It tells your body, hey, stay awake, it's daytime. And while that's useful during the morning hours, it becomes a silent saboteur after sunset. Margaret's doctor gently explained that our brains rely on something called the circadian rhythm, a 24-hour internal clock that responds to light and darkness. When light hits your eyes in the morning, your brain wakes up. When darkness falls, your body starts producing melatonin, the sleep hormone. But here's the catch: for many people over 60, melatonin production naturally drops, and any artificial light in the evening, even a reading lamp or a hallway bulb, can confuse the brain into thinking it's still daytime. so Margaret began making a few simple changes. She opened her curtains first thing in the morning and let real sunlight flood her home, even if it was just for a few minutes. She took her coffee out to the porch instead of drinking it under the kitchen lights, and in the evening she swapped out cool white bulbs for softer, warmer tones, the kind that mimic candlelight. Most importantly, she began honoring the transition into night. Instead of flipping on every lamp after dinner, she'd light a candle in the living room. She started calling it her quiet hour. No cleaning, no emails, no planning tomorrow. Just dim light, soft music, and stillness. And her brain responded. Her body began releasing melatonin earlier, more naturally. Her eyelids would grow heavy, not out of exhaustion, but out of readiness. It wasn't magic, it was biology, finally allowed to do what it was meant to. This was one of the most powerful lessons she learned. Better sleep isn't about trying harder, it's about removing the obstacles that keep your body from doing what it already knows how to do. And speaking of obstacles, there was one more she hadn't thought much about until a restless night brought it to light. Literally. Noise, not loud, dramatic noise, not sirens or alarm, but the tiny, persistent sounds that fade into the background during the day but grow louder when the house is still. The refrigerator hum, the ticking clock, the creaking pipes. A dog barking in the distance, even the distant whoosh of a passing car. These sounds, though small, can prevent your brain from fully entering deep sleep. The kind of sleep where your body repairs itself, where memory consolidates, where true rest happens. Margaret hadn't noticed them before, but once she started tuning in, she realized that each little sound was tugging her slightly out of rest, not enough to wake her fully, but just enough to keep her in the shallow end of the sleep pool. So she tried something new. She downloaded a soft, steady white noise track on her phone. Nothing fancy. Just a gentle whoosh like a soft wind through trees. She placed her phone on the far side of the room, set it to low volume, and let it play all night. And to her surprise, her dreams came back. For the first time in years, she woke up remembering vivid images, colors, faces, stories that only come when the brain feels safe enough to descend into deep sleep. The white noise didn't add anything. It simply masked the tiny interruptions that had been stealing her rest in the background. It reminded her of something from childhood, how, as a little girl, she would fall asleep to the hum of her parents talking in the kitchen. Not words she could understand, just the soft, comforting murmur of life happening nearby. That same feeling returned, a sense of security, of being held gently in the world. Sleep, she realized, wasn't just about her body being tired. It was about her environment whispering to her nervous system, "You're safe now. You can let go." And so she kept letting go, not just of noise, but of expectations, of the belief that sleep needed to be perfect, that one bad night meant she had failed somehow, that if she couldn't sleep like she used to, something was broken. She began to see her sleep not as a performance, but as a practice. Some nights were easy, others were restless, but each evening became a quiet invitation to slow down, to come home to herself. There's one last piece to this, though, one that surprised her more than anything else. It had to do with forgiveness, not of others, of herself. Because even with all the changes, the tea, the light, the journaling, the mattress, Margaret still had nights when sleep didn't come. Nights when her legs ached or her thoughts lingered too long. And at first she would lie there in frustration, whispering, "Why can't I just sleep?" But one night she caught herself. She placed her hand on her chest and said softly, "It's okay, we'll try again tomorrow." That tiny phrase, "We'll try again tomorrow," became her lullaby. Her permission slip to stop fighting the night, to trust that even restlessness was temporary, that even wakefulness could be kind, because sometimes the worst bedtime habit isn't physical, it's emotional, It's the habit of blaming ourselves for being human. Margaret stopped doing that, and over time, sleep stopped being a battlefield. It became something else, something sacred, a conversation between her body and her spirit, a reunion, a homecoming. That one phrase, "We'll try again tomorrow," shifted everything. It turned sleep from a struggle into a relationship. One built on trust, not pressure, on patience, not perfection. And it allowed Margaret to approach each night with gentleness, even the difficult ones, especially the difficult ones, because the truth is, not every night will be perfect. And that's okay. There were still nights when she got up to use the bathroom, nights when the wind rattled the window or a sudden memory kept her eyes wide open longer than she wanted. But what changed most was how she responded. She stopped panicking. She stopped checking the clock every 10 minutes. She stopped that endless mental spiral of, if I don't sleep now, I'll feel awful tomorrow. Instead, she would take a few deep breaths, remind herself she was safe, and sometimes even get up for just a moment, sit quietly, sip a small glass of water, stretch her hands, light a candle, and breathe it in, and then go back to bed when she felt ready. Not because she was forcing herself, but because she trusted sleep to come, eventually, gently, naturally, and more often than not, it did. One morning she sat at her kitchen table, tea in hand, this time unsweetened, and looked out at her blooming hibiscus. The sun was barely up, the house was still, and she smiled, not because she had slept like a teenager, but because she felt rested, supported, rebalanced. That was the real transformation. It wasn't just about avoiding mistakes, it was about creating harmony, about honoring her body's needs, her emotional rhythms, and her desire for peace. And when all of those things came together, when her evenings became rituals of kindness instead of routines of habit, her nights followed suit. Now, maybe you're watching this and wondering, can I really change my sleep too? Even after years of struggling? The answer is yes. And it starts with noticing, with asking yourself the same questions Margaret asked, slowly and honestly. Is what I'm doing before bed really helping me feel calm? Am I holding on to routines that once worked, but don't anymore? Am I giving myself permission to slow down? Or am I pressuring myself to do rest correctly? You don't need to get everything right overnight. Just pick one thing. Maybe tonight you dim the lights a little earlier. Maybe you leave the honey out of your tea. Maybe you write a few quiet thoughts in a notebook just to see how it feels. Maybe you stop blaming yourself when sleep is elusive. That's how change begins, not with overhauls or perfection, but with compassion, with tiny choices repeated with care. And if there's one thing Margaret's story reminds us of, it's this. You are not broken. Your sleep isn't lost. It's just waiting for you to meet it differently, to greet it with softness instead of struggle. To remember that rest isn't earned, it's your right. And that no matter how long it's been, you can always begin again. Tonight, tomorrow, any time your heart says enough. There's something deeply sacred about aging, about learning to live inside a body that's changing. It teaches you to listen more, to force less, to honor subtlety. Sleep is part of that journey, and so is learning to embrace it in all its shapes. Full nights, broken nights, quiet moments of stillness. You don't have to fix everything to feel better. You just have to begin with presence. And perhaps most importantly, you are not alone. Millions of people, women and men just like you, are quietly learning to rest again, gently unlearning what no longer serves them, and slowly rediscovering how to feel held inside their homes, inside their beds, inside their own skin. Margaret was one of them. And now, maybe, so are you. And so now, as the sky darkens and the world begins to hush, I want to speak directly to you, you who may be watching this at the end of a long day. Maybe your legs are tired. Maybe your heart is a little heavy. Maybe you're just hoping quietly, tenderly, that tonight might be better than last night. Let me tell you something important. It can be, not because you'll do everything perfectly, not because you'll suddenly sleep 8 hours straight, but because even small, loving changes like the ones Margaret made can shift the way you move through the night. You've already heard the habits to be mindful of. The evening snack that feels comforting but quietly stirs your blood sugar. The warm shower taken just a little too late. The soft glow of a screen that tricks your brain into staying awake. The well-meaning glass of water that sends you to the bathroom just as your dreams begin. You've felt how tension in your body and in your heart can cling to you like static, making it hard to settle. You've lived through the ache of trying too hard, the silence that sometimes feels too loud, the mornings where rest felt just out of reach. But now you also know that none of this is permanent, none of this is final, and you are never too old, too late, or too far gone to come back to yourself, to come back to rest. That's what sleep is after all. It's a return to safety, to softness, to trust. So let this be your gentle invitation, not to overhaul your life, but to try one small kindness tonight, just one. Maybe that means turning off the news a little earlier and playing music you love instead. Maybe it means opening a window and letting the night air kiss your cheek before bed. Maybe it means saying something to yourself you haven't heard in a long time. You've done enough. You are enough. You can rest now. We spend so much of our lives in motion, solving, fixing, achieving, adjusting. But sleep doesn't ask for any of that. It only asks that we let go of the idea that rest must be earned. Let go of the belief that something is wrong with you because your nights are broken. Let go of the voices, internal or external, that tell you it's hopeless or selfish or indulgent to rest, because it isn't. Sleep is not a luxury. It's not a reward. It's a rhythm, a birthright, a soft return to balance. And when you begin to see it that way, something changes, not just in your nights, but in your days too. You start to walk a little slower, not because you're tired, but because you're present. You speak to yourself with more patience. You make choices from a place of care, not urgency. You stop rushing rest, and in return, rest comes to you. And that is where healing begins. You may not be able to undo years of stress overnight. You may still wake once or twice, but even within those awakenings there can be peace, there can be gentleness, there can be a quiet sense that you are not lost. You are just learning to listen differently, to trust differently, to sleep not out of exhaustion but from a place of safety and self-respect. And if all of this feels new, if it feels fragile or uncertain or like too much to remember, that's okay too. Just come back to this. You are allowed to rest, fully, deeply, without guilt, without apology. Even if the world around you keeps moving, even if your to-do list isn't finished, even if your thoughts wander, you are allowed to close your eyes and say, I've done enough for today. That one sentence, spoken softly in the dark, may be the most powerful medicine there is. So tonight, before your head hits the pillow, I invite you to give yourself that gift. Not the perfect sleep, not the flawless routine, just the simple act of allowing yourself to be held by your breath, by the quiet, by the knowledge that you're still here, still learning, still worthy of peace. You are not alone on this path. There are millions of people all over the world gently rewriting their relationship with sleep, just like you. And every small change, every act of care is a step toward healing not just your nights, but your whole life. So if this video has helped you, if even one thing resonated, feel free to share your experience in the comments below. You never know who might read it and feel less alone. And if you'd like more content like this, filled with simple, compassionate guidance for your health and happiness after 60, don't forget to subscribe. Tap that little bell so you won't miss our next conversation. Until then, may your nights be soft, your breath steady, and your heart at ease. You've earned it. Here's to peaceful sleep, and to living your most rested, radiant life, at any age. Good night, and take good care of yourself.